Greetings, everyone. This is Andrew with MobileBurn.com, and I'm reviewing the Blue Life View. Now, you may remember a few months back, I reviewed the Life Play, and basically the goal of that phone was to introduce specs that were not as high as the top end of what you see with Android, but were good enough and comparable enough that you would be interested because of the price. The same is true with the Blue Life View. Here you've got this big screen, and the whole package is only available for $299. So the question, is this phone good enough like the Blue Life Play was? Only one way to find out. Calling this the Blue Life View is an apt name because of the screen, obviously. This has a 5.7-inch display. Now, that's obviously very large, larger than what you typically see on most devices. It's an LED backlit display, so you do get a lot of colors, about 1600 million. But the problem that I have with this device is that it's only 720p instead of 1080p. Now, when you're looking at colors to select for your background or something, typically it's a very nice display. You know, it's not the best out there, but it is good. The problem comes more when you're viewing video and you kind of see where it falls short. Where when you look at smaller devices arguing over 720 versus 1080, it isn't really much of a difference. But on the Live View, you do notice that at times that it's not as clear or as breathtaking as it would be had they upgraded the storage. Now, obviously, that larger screen dictates this is going to be a larger device. And with the 5.7-inch display, reasonably sized bezels on the sides, you can see this obviously increases to the overall size of the device. When you compare it to the Galaxy Mega 6.3 that I reviewed a few weeks ago, you can see it's not quite as tall or quite as wide, but it is definitely in the same ballpark because it's a big device. Ironically, this weighs a lot more than the Galaxy Mega, so it's a lot thicker as well. So this actually is easier to hold because of the weight. It's more resting in your hand, solid. It doesn't feel like it's going to fall out as much as the Galaxy Mega does. And the thickness allows you to have a little firmer grip on the sides. While we're on the sides, here you can see it has volume up and down buttons on the left, power on the right, micro USB on the bottom. At the top, you have your headphone jack. And now when I reviewed the Blue Life Play, I complained because their headphone jack was really shoddy because unless you use the included speakers, it didn't sound very well. But that's not a problem here. I've tested with some of my other earphones, and it worked without issue. So that's a big improvement. It's a small thing, but it is a big improvement in the end. And I mentioned that this was heavier than the Galaxy Mega. This weighs 220 grams or 7.78 ounces. Now that is definitely a little bit thicker than you typically see with the smartphone today. It doesn't feel obsessively big, excessively heavy. Obviously, it's less than half a pound. But at the same time, when you consider how small most devices are, this is definitely leaving a mark. And let's talk about the design of it for a second. It's kind of interesting because when you look at the front, kind of reminds you of a Samsung device. But when you look on the back, it might be a little familiar to HTC fans out there. They're kind of, what's the word? It's not aluminum, like the same type of treatment, the oxidation part that you get with HTC devices, but it has the same type of color. So when you see it next to an HTC One on the back, oh, it looks a little familiar, doesn't it? But when you see it next to a Samsung on the front, oh, I can kind of see where they went with that. So it's kind of like if you mix these two devices, you know, these two devices had a baby. You know, I don't know if that's possible with devices. You'd end up with the Blue Life View. So that's definitely something that you should notice, obviously, when you use the device. Another thing you might notice, it has a 12 megapixel camera on the back. I'm not the biggest fan of the camera, but I will say that it is passable. It works, has a decent camera interface, and it allows you to do a lot of things. You can follow the link in the description below. You can see some of the photos that were taken with the camera, and at times the LED flash included will definitely give off a blue vibe. You'll definitely notice the blue tint when you use photos with the flash, but most of the time when you take a picture, there's going to be some noise, so a little bit of grain, but it's typically a decent shot, especially if you're going to resize just to show online. But when I remove this little plate on the back, it reveals two things: dual SIM slots. There are mini SIMs, so if you have a micro or nano SIM, you're going to have to go into your carrier and get a bigger SIM card. I only have micro SIMs in my apartment right now, so I'm unfortunately unable to test how the phone quality is when you're on a call. I can't vouch for call quality or data speeds, but it should work with AT&T or T-Mobile if you're in the US, or with any of their authorized MVNOs. The problem will be getting the right SIM card because most phones released in the US today don't have these slots. As far as the software, it's pretty much what we've come to expect from Blue products. It's not stock Android, but it's kind of stock Android adjacent. For instance, this is the Dialer app. It's a little bit different from what you typically see. And you might notice that the accent colors are different as well. Instead of the light blue that we typically see, it has a pink right there. And the reason for that is you can actually go into settings. Go to settings now, and you can change the accents with the theme. Once you're in the display section, you can change between the default, which is the light blue, or you can say, I want mint, which is going to be a light green. So that's one of the things that you can change when it comes to the Blue Life View. Other than that, they've added a few little things trying to plug holes in Android itself. For instance, you have a file manager built in, so if you want to browse your files, this is the where you would go to do this. Now, this device has 16 gigabytes of internal storage, around 13 of which is actually accessible to you. So if you want to browse in here, you can just go in there and then you can go through all the folders that you have. Speaking of storage, one quick note, there's no micro SD slot on here. So once you get to your 13 gigabytes of actual files and photos and all that, you're pretty much out of space. You're going to have to start relying on the cloud or remove some things from the device. Moving on, most of the apps are pretty much standard of what you get with Android. So this is running Android 4.2 Jelly Bean. Not all of the Google apps are included. For instance, Chrome is not there, but it does have the browser app. And of course, it has the all-important Play Store. So when you go in the Play Store, you have millions of choices of apps that you can get, including the Google apps there. So you can download Chrome if you want that to be your browser. And if you want the completely regular apps that you get from Google, you can download them as well. Most of them are included in preloaded, I should say, like Gmail, what was it? Google Maps, of course. So you have that. A couple of things that they've added here is the notebook. The notebook is pretty much where you're going to go to create new notes, jot little things down for yourself. Of course, it has the stock Android keyboard, and I can create a note and then save it. Unfortunately, all this is locally stored. There's nothing particularly impressive about it. There's no way to sync it up online between devices or access it on the web. It's still just your standard fare. The same goes for the Task app. You can have little tasks if you got a to-do list that you need to manage, but there's no way to sync it up and access it on the web. Other than that, most of the apps here are pretty much standard. Other than trying to plug holes, like I mentioned. You've got your FM radio app. You have your music app, which is kind of a throwback because it looks just like the old music app that used to come with Android 2.3. There's some changes, obviously, but you can download Play Music if you prefer that. But this is something that you have. While we're on the subject of music, the external speaker is not the loudest out there. It's kind of disappointing, but it gets a little distorted when it goes too high. But it's there in case you want to use it. And like I mentioned before, they did improve the headphone jack, so that's something to look forward to. One rather unique aspect of this is that it has a widget on the home screen that you can use to have video contacts. So if rather than have a static picture of someone, I can go through and select the contact. So I'll select the fake one, and I'll go through camera and choose a video, and then I'll say, all right, this can be a video. And it'll convert it to a format that can display, and for a short amount of time you'll see that video, and then you can reach the person that way. So you see the animation right there between these three, and I say, you know what, I want to talk to that person. I tap on it and it shows me this fake person's information. Now, in terms of the regular operation of using the device, like browsing the web or just transitioning between apps, multitasking, all that stuff. I don't really have any complaints about the way that the Blue Life View operates. I walked in expecting this to be a below high end device. I knew it wasn't going to be on par with something like the Mega or an ACC one like that. But I was still disappointed by it from a gaming aspect. It only has 1 gig of RAM and it has a quad core 1.2 gigahertz processor. So you would think that would be pretty good. But the problem is it's running A7s for each core from ARM. So it's a little bit weaker than most. And I noticed this particularly when playing games. When I tried to play Riptide 2, the screen it took longer to load apps. Visually, the GPU just did not keep up at all. Typically, what you see when you're playing Riptide is that the waves kind of just like flow right from underneath your jet ski. That doesn't happen when you're playing on a live view. You can kind of see the water get in the way. You can see the performance lagging. So it's not really impressive from a gaming standpoint. When I switched to some other games, things got a little bit better, but at the end of the day, I would recommend avoiding this if you plan to do a lot of high-end gaming. If you just want a phone that's going to have a big screen, that's going to look nice, you should be okay. But otherwise, I'd advise stepping into other directions. My opinion on the Live View is similar to my opinion on the Live Play. It's good enough, but good enough is very much dependent on who you are. If you're a gamer, you might as well just take this out of the equation right now because it's not going to be good enough for you. It's not going to be fast enough. There's not enough RAM to make this really zip along the way that it should. Otherwise, you're just going to have to rely on the big screen, and that's what's the draw here. This is more for people who don't really need the most powerful device, but want something that's going to have a big display that's going to show a lot of information at once, and that's what the Live View does. It succeeds in that regard. It has low RAM, it has a lower processor, it's not very powerful, and that's kind of a disappointment. So if you're an early adopter, you're itching for that device that's going to be really zipping along, you might want to look elsewhere like a Galaxy Note 3 or the ACC One Max whenever that comes out. But if you're just looking for something on the cheap, for $299, that's very attractive at this price point. Has a good enough camera, decent performance. I wouldn't say it's fast. There's actually at times where you feel like it's a little bit slower than it should be. But overall, the Live View kind of come through in the clutch for what it needs to be. When you consider the price point, that's what makes it attractive. It gives you a big display for a small price. That might be enough for some, but like I said, the early adopter crowd, the really tech enthusiasts, this might not be in your ballpark. This is Andrew with MobileBurn.com reviewing the Blue Live Play. Thanks for watching. Be sure to click the link below to see our full written review with more insight as well as photo samples.